instead of me entering these values or these formulas in every one of those cells, and sometimes you may have 100 cells or 200 or more, what you can do is you utilize the autofill feature. So all you do is you click on the cell that has the formula already in it, and then you drag it down after you click on the bottom right when the mouse changes to just a little plus sign, and then drag it down and then let it go. So notice all of those numbers now add up, for example, to 832. So that the concept here is using the autofill feature. The autofill feature comes in very handy for anything that is in a sequence. For example, if you want, let's say, to type the days of the week, and you want to fill those days in a sequence, instead of you having to type them manually, what you can do is just type the first day of the week and then drag it down. I guess this should have been Sunday, the first day of the week, so let's do Sunday, and then drag it down. If you wanted to do months of the year, so you type 1 and then drag it down. And you get the idea here. You can do it for numbers, you can do it for, actually for numbers you have to be cautious here. If you drag this down for actual numbers, by default it's leave it with the current number, but notice there is a drop down here under the autofill options, and you can choose autofill and then choose fill series, because it's seeing as numbers and it's basically giving you a chance to leave them alone the way number and just replicate it, or just go to the next number up. So you can choose fill series, and then it'll do what you probably were looking to do to start with. You can also use this feature, the autofill feature, by typing, let's say, things in a sequence, for example 1 and 4. Let's say you want to have like 3 in between two numbers. What you do is you select that range, for example 1 and 4, those two cells, and then you drag this down together. So notice I had selected both of them, and now notice it says 1, 4, 7, 10, 13, and so on. So we have 3 in between those two numbers that we started with, and it gives us a sequence of it. So that's basically the autofill feature. So let me get rid of those quickly here. And let's get back to some of the formatting or different components here on the formatting of the text. As far as formatting of the text, it's actually pretty easy. Just like in Microsoft Word, you'll select the text and make it larger or smaller, just like in Word. You can also select a whole bunch of cells. Notice here, like it says using Excel, but it's kind of indented slightly to the left. You can select this whole range here and then go ahead and change it so that it merges all of those cells and it centers that component. So the concept that we are learning here is the actual merge and center. Now that we merged and centered it, you can make this font larger and customize it the way you want it. Notice there are also styles that you can use for those cells under the formatting here. Just like in Word, there are different styles, and here you can use, for example, heading 1 or title or something like that. So depending on what you want and how you want the style here. As far as formatting of the numbers, notice you can select these numbers, the range here, and then format them. There are some little quick access toolbar type of thing here regarding numbers or different commonly used tools, or you can click on the drop down and let's say you want to format that as currency. So you click on currency here and it's going to put the dollar signs with the decimal points as well. As far as further formatting here, keep in mind that, like I said earlier, there is also the style formatting, so that would be the easiest to utilize, and you can pick any of those, or you can format things manually by you selecting a range of cells and then changing here the background color to what you may be interested in. And I'll show you a little bit more on conditional formatting and that type of stuff briefly, shortly here in another one of those videos. Welcome back. In this session we are going to learn a little bit about references and the different types of references. There are 4 types of references. Most of the references that you use out there, they are what's called the relative references. If you notice here, we have the sum and then C5 through C13. When I drag this over, it replicated it. It went to D5 through D13, and then E5 and E13, and so on. So it's moving from one spot to the other in a relative way. So if you remember when we did the annual net income in this formula earlier, we had a problem when we referenced the number of months here via a formula. So for example, if we go here and use the autofill feature, notice to calculate the annual net income for these employees, notice it works. It gives us the correct values. However, if we go and delete this, and like I mentioned earlier, it's best to use references for calculating stuff. So let's say we want to get the net income, the net pay, for example, for a month for the first employee here is this value. And then if we wanted to calculate it based on a predefined value, for example, number of months or annual, so let's say 12 here, so it'll be that times 12, monthly income times 12, hit enter. Notice the first calculation is correct, and the reason is because we just entered it manually. You could do the same thing here for the second one, so you do equal the monthly times the number, and that will work. However, if you go and drag this down, that will not work. It will give you 0. So notice what's happening on the one that it's giving you a 0. It's multiplying G25 times this blank number here. So it's going 1 down and 1 down from our original place. Then we go to the next one. Notice it's going further down. It's going 3 down from our original place because we started here 1, 2, 3. So we started here 1, 2, 3, and now we are in the 4th spot. So that's why we are getting zeros. So what we are doing here is that these references, they are called relative references. So for example, this one right here, its reference or its address, it's L20, and that is not locked. If you were to make it an absolute reference, meaning stay put and locked down, what that'll do is, or the way you can do it as an absolute reference referring to this number of months, is by putting dollar signs here. So if you put dollar sign in front of it, in front of the L or the column, and in front of the row, and then hit enter here, it will still be the same number. However, when you use the autofill feature, notice those calculations will be correct because it's locked on L20. We are telling the system not to go down here on L. Now you'd say, well, why would I want to use a point of reference here? Well, the idea here is that you would say, well, if I want to hire this guy for 6 months or these guys for 6 months, then what would be their annual salary? So you could just simply change this to 6, hit enter, and all of these numbers will be updated automatically. So that's the advantage, that instead of you having to go to the formula and tinkering with the number of months manually for each one of them, you just have a single point of reference. You change that to 11 months or whatever, and that is updated automatically. And that's the beauty of Excel. So here technically you could put sum or total. You put the sum of all these, and then at any point you can know, so let's say I want to hire them for 18 months, what your expenses will be. Here's another example. If we go to this other tab and notice, let's say you have a budget of $20,000 for something. Let's say that there is going to be a decrease in your budget by 5% on each item. Now you have training, for example, training was $4,000. Now the 5% you have to give up. Calculate how much you have to give up on what the difference is here that you have to give up. So what you do is you do the equal sign and you take this number, training, the value, times the percentage that you have to give up. And then you hit enter. So you have to give up $200. Now notice what happens, that if I drag this down, I get very large numbers. On the second cell here, on D7, I don't get anything. But on the other ones, you'll notice in a moment that you'll get very large values. And by the way, anytime you see these number signs here, that means that column, it's not wide enough. So what you have to do is go here to the top and move it to the right. Or another trick here is to double click between the columns, and it will make it exactly at the widest point. Now your question would be, well, why do I have on travel, I had only $2,000 budget, but now somehow the difference is $10 million. The reason for that is because notice what's being calculated. It's calculating C, so C11 right here, times C9. Because what's happening is, as it's moving down, when we did the autofill, as the autofill was moving down, it shifted one down automatically. So if we go here, it was C7 and C5. So 100 times 0 is 0. The next one, it got 8,000 times 4,000 is 32 million, and so on. So what we need to figure out here is we need to use what's called an absolute reference. So we delete all this stuff. And by the way, this is one of the difficult concepts to explain, but this is important and we need to know it. So on the absolute reference here, what we do is that we go and change the C4. Remember, we said that if you see the C4, that's a relative reference. If you see it with the dollar signs, that's an absolute reference. There is also a third type of reference. So you have the relative, and the relative references would be, for example, C4. Absolute, that'll be dollar sign C, dollar sign 4. And then you also have what's called mixed references. And mixed reference is when one piece, either the column or the row, is the one that is locked. So it could be, for example, C dollar sign 4 or dollar sign C 4. So either one of those. So in our case here, we're going to go back here, and we want to, because we have one point of reference, so we want to lock this. So that means it will have both dollar signs in the reference. So we do C6, which is this guy, times 5%. Now, you can either type the dollar signs manually there, or you can press F4 in Excel, and it will put the dollar signs automatically for you. If you push F4 again, it will change it to a mixed reference that I just explained a moment ago, or the other variation here of the mixed reference. And then you tap it again one more time. That will take you to the relative reference. What we want in our case is the absolute reference. Hit enter. Now drag it down, and notice that our calculations are correct. Now you'd say, why would I want to go through all of this trouble? The reason for that is because the economy is doing worse. And what you do is, the boss comes along and says, there's going to be a decrease of 7%. You simply type 7 right there. Everything gets updated automatically. Let's say that you're planning on something or giving a raise to your employees or a percentage. It's going to be, instead of 7%, it's going to be 9% or whatever it may be. You just change one value in one place, and then all references to that value get updated automatically. So it's a very important concept. It's very important to use. You'll find uses for it in business, and it's very important to remember how to do this. Now, before we actually leave here a moment, let's explain a little bit the mixed references. On the mixed references, well, you'd use those if you have a bunch of those values or key values that you would modify, and those could be either in a row or in a column. Now, if you want to lock them down by that specific row, what you'd do is you'd simply lock down the row portion of it. So it would be this first one, the C $4. So you're locking in that specific row. If you wanted to lock the column, depending on where the column is, then, or what the values in that column are, then you'd lock it'll be the second instance here. So the $C and then 4, because you're allowing